will never forget the time someone suggested that I check my son's earlobes, his cuticles, his scrotum, even the crack of his butt. Now, in hindsight, I realized the suggestion was offered to help me feel better. The woman who gave it explained that if I checked, I could see my son's true color. And I'll admit it, I checked, but I didn't see any darkness. Checking was like an unofficial test to find authentic blackness in my son, Noah. And when the test did not reveal what many thought was missing, my family launched into action. Well-intentioned. They wanted me to understand the complexion of Noah. They told me stories about my great-great whomever. They recalled distant cousins, relatives, aunts and uncles, really anyone who was light-skinned. The point of all of it was they wanted me to remember that Black people are varying shades of brown. I know that. But when I looked at myself, my caramel-colored husband, and the beautiful mahogany girl, our oldest child, Nala, that we had given birth to some 5 years earlier, and then I looked at Noah, our son, who was born with blonde hair, blue eyes, and milky skin. Noah has albinism. And before giving birth to him, I'd never heard of albinism. I had heard the word albino in passing, but I wasn't entirely sure of what it meant. I heard the word a lot in the days following Noah's birth. And I didn't like the way it made me feel. Every time it was said, it was always preceding his name. And it just seemed to suggest that something was wrong. But I realized Noah is different, but mostly because of the way other people behaved. 2 nurses, they might have been hospital staff, stand out the most in my memory of the days I was recovering from Noah's C-section birth. And I want to tell you about them. But before I do, can I keep it real? Yeah. If I were to recall this story back when it happened, I wouldn't be very nice. Nurse A, that's what I'll call her. You allow the A to stand for whatever you want. But Nurse A, I remember she took a look at Noah and at me, and with this bewildered look, she questioned, where did he get all that blonde hair? And then she offered her own explanation, telling me the light-skinned gene can skip a generation or 2 before it shows up. And then there was Nurse B. I was thinking the same thing. Nurse B, honestly, I thought she was coming to give me breastfeeding tips. She had a question of paternity. She wanted to know if my husband was the biological father. He had only been coddling the baby, being attentive to me. I don't remember what I said, or maybe I should say what I did not say, but I remember how I felt. Devastated is an understatement. But now I get it. I understand why albinism is a novelty for some. Many of us are not familiar with the condition by its name. Many of us don't know a person with albinism intimately. And roughly 1 in every 20,000 people worldwide have some form of the condition. And yes, it does refer to the impaired production of melanin in the hair, skin, and eyes, but that is not its only health effect. Albinism can be disabling, mostly because it can cause significant and sometimes uncorrectable vision impairment, as is the case with my son. And albinism can increase the risk of developing skin cancers. That risk is partially why I religiously would cover Noah's head with hats and his eyes with sunglasses. But if I'm honest, I was practicing some communication avoidance. Probing questions, glaring stares frustrated me. I wanted to enjoy my baby, not explain him. Now I realize I had to get a handle on how I responded to negative reactions to my son. After all, both of my children were listening to me and learning their communication cues about albinism from me. I can't control what other people say, but I can control what I say. And that's why I've tried to learn as much as I can about albinism, so that my conversation not only reflects knowledge, but I can convey sensitivity. And I've learned that some people with albinism, depending on where you live, experience significant social challenges. For example, in the sub-Saharan region of Africa, people with albinism are in grave danger. Many live in isolation because they fear mutilation, death even, all because of myths about their appearance. Some of the more outrageous stories include the idea that a person with albinism is magical or that they have healing properties. There is even the idea that an albinic arm or leg would make an excellent good luck charm for another person. And then when you think about albinism for a person of color, it can create some visual confusion. And that's because albinism produces a white race or racially ambiguous appearing body. That complexity has been really challenging to help my young son understand. We talk about it often as different situations come up, mostly because race is a significant social construct. It's a communication tool. We've all used it to categorize people based on their physical characteristics. We've used it to understand cultural practices. We even use race to define our ideologies. And as a communication professor, I enjoy studying the relationship between race and communication. It's a topic that comes up often in my classrooms. So you can see why I feel invested to help my son understand the complexity of his identity and how people might be perceiving him. But I also want to help him craft his own narrative of what it means to be a Black male in America with albinism and a disability. Studies tell us that a child's self-esteem is significantly influenced by their environment. And furthermore, studies tell us that kids with damaged self-esteem have a greater risk of developing psychological, social problems. So as a mom, that concerns me. And it's why I make it a point to talk about difference often with both of my kids, but to celebrate the best in being different. I hope that my son, both of my kids, come to see their racial identity as a positive distinction, not a negative point of racial juxtaposition. In 2 days, Noah's going to celebrate his 7th birthday. And he talks about having albinism as though it is a superpower. And I think it's because we talk about it at home like it is. In the smallest ways, I try to point out the good in being different. For example, I might refer to his hair as golden or his skin as porcelain. And now he has that brown spot, a tiny mole that I was looking for. And I lovingly tease him about that being proof of his family, but a rich heritage of Black people within him. As a scholar, I can research and explore the implications of positive talk, but as a mom, I can tell you it works. Already, my son advocates for himself. He articulates his identity rather well. And I am so proud of his first grade self-portrait. He explained the use of brown construction paper by saying, "My outside is obvious, but my inside is not." And he's right. I tell him, "You possess something so great inside, far greater than what anyone can see outwardly, and that is despite any stereotype about your Black identity, with or without albinism." But the truth is, I'm working on that. Every day, I tweak my communication about albinism, but in the way I speak about difference in general. And it's got me wondering, what if all of us attempt small changes in the way we speak about people we think are different? Could it be that if we talked and behaved with a bit more care and consideration of difference, we could help that person feel more included, see themselves more holistically and confidently? Maybe we can't change how we've come to be, but I think we can change how we communicate our being. Thank you.